Thank you for all the love on my Springtrap costume. Genuinely my favorite costume build that I've done so far, even though it's not perfect. But today I wanted to showcase the process of my Thorin Oakenshield costume. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a big Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit fan, and Thorin was my ultimate cosplay dream cosplan since the first Hobbit movie came out. I know the Hobbit movies aren't as good as the Lord of the Rings movies. I grew up with the Lord of the Rings movies, but there's something about the first Hobbit movie that's my ultimate comfort movie, and ever since that scene where they're in Bag End and the dwarves are singing about Erebor, specifically Thorin's scene, that scene in particular made me really want to cosplay as Thorin Oakenshield. A very long time I didn't have the abilities or the skills or the knowledge to make that costume until I went to college for costume design, and through all the knowledge that I gained there, I felt like I finally knew how to tackle this build. So in 2020 I decided to do it, considering I had so much free time. And this year I also competed in the CosBond Creator Contest, and I was one of the winners with this costume, so yay! So please enjoy these process pics and videos of when I was making my Thorin Oakenshield cosplay, and if you like what you see and want to see more, please subscribe. You can just click the subscribe button, give this video a like, and here is the footage. Enjoy! So I started off this build by making the props, the Oakenshield and Orcrist and the sheath. I used foam. At this point in time, I had never really made a sword before, besides some Mollymock swords and Tariel daggers I made, but every time I make them I do it differently. And I use CosBond adhesive as well as like hot glue and some other various glues to glue everything together. And this was the first time I'd ever used a heat gun on a prop. In the past I'd never really used a heat gun much before this point, and I really enjoyed it. I made this build in 2020, so since then I've learned a lot. And I spray painted everything outside, and I used a brown textured paint, which is a technique I learned from like 10 years ago when I made a Jack Frost cosplay. And then I detail painted it by hand, and that part was a lot of fun. And I'm really happy with how the shield turned out. And here's me just showing off the props. Woohoo! Next, I made the bracers, which I also made out of CosBond adhesive and foam. And I bought a pattern from, I think it was McCall's, a costume pattern that they came out years ago that had already a pattern of the Thorin Oakenshield costume. And so they had a pattern for the bracers that I traced and used for my bracers. And I sewed this little bracer sleeves out of fake leather that I got from Joann's. And then I just detailed the bracers, spray painted them, and then detail painted them by hand. Then I made the boots. I don't know why I decided to make all the accessories first. I wanted to get the easier build out of the way. And I made the steel toes out of foam once again, and I made the little fur sleeves out of fake fur I also bought at Joann's, and then I spray painted the toes and the heels and detail painted them by hand. And then I made this fake mud concoction, which I have made a few times now. The fake mud concoction is made out of brown, green, and a few shades within those families of acrylic paint or fabric paint, and then you can use coffee grounds. And I cut up some tea bags and put some like tea in it to get more of variety and texture, and I put a bunch of Mod Podge and glue in it and mix it all together, and you just slap it on there. Next up was all of the sewing I had to do. Again, I used the Thorin costume pattern that I had bought, and they had each pattern basically for all of the elements I wanted to use, so I would just use them. I don't know if they had a pattern for this under tunic, since the design is basically pretty simple. I really could just guess and eyeball what it would look like, since I've made simple garments in the past. And luckily they had the pattern for the over tunic, and this one I bought 2 different fabrics for. I believe I bought them from Mood Fabrics, and I just sewed everything together. Some elements had to be sewn by hand, like the little shoulder wings, and after I sewed everything, I distressed everything. I usually use either a brown dye and I just dry brush it on, or I use brown and black fabric paint to distress pieces. I also went in with fake makeup blood and made everything a little bloody, since he's fighting in the same outfits and doesn't always have time to wash his clothes, I am assuming, just to make everything look more lived in. And I also added little thread chains on either side of this outer robe and in the back for when I wore the belt. The next piece, I made the armor layer. I had a lot of this fake like dragon scale faux leather, so I just used that for the armor layer, but I used the wrong side of it, so it was just this gray. And referencing my images of Thorin, it was more of a bluish color, so I just ended up painting the whole thing with fabric paint, and watered down fabric paint, so it worked really well. And then I mass produced these little armor scales and spray painted all of them, glued them all onto this faux leather piece that I made, and then hand painted everything. And this took ages. The coat was the most exciting thing to make, and after referencing some images and rewatching the first movie and the beginning of the second movie, I saw that Thorin's coat was split into like these different panels, so I made sure to replicate that because it wasn't like that in the pattern that I had bought. And initially I had used this faux fur that I got at Joann's just because it was during lockdown and I couldn't really find the fur that I wanted to use, nor could I afford it at the time. But later on, like a year later, I did end up redoing the fur. And then for the belt, I used Wonderflex, and I just sculpted that into the shape of the belt that I wanted. And then the actual belt base was just faux leather. And then I painted the belt buckle, and I did the rings out of Wonderflex as well. And then I hand painted everything, and there is that. The beard I have gotten many questions on over the years. I just bought a beard prosthetic on Amazon. I can't remember the company anymore. They market it as real human hair, but who knows? And it's like a lace front beard, but it didn't come with a mustache piece, so I just hand sewed on a little bit of more netting for the mustache part, and I already know how to ventilate wigs, so I just ventilated that part of the mustache with extra hair fibers that I had. And that was the final Thorin costume up to that point. The wig I also ended up cutting too short, and I hated it, and I had fully hand ventilated that front part of the wig, which took me ages. I was okay enough with this costume. I was one of the winners of the CosBond Creator Contest, so it was worth it. But then at the beginning of 2021, I wanted to redo the fur, and I had the money to, so I hand took everything off, bought the new fur from Mood Fabrics, threw everything back on, and hand stitched the whole thing, and it was worth it. I distressed the fur of the coat. Then I ended up purchasing a new wig, reventilated the front hairline of the wig, and I ended up not really cutting it at all. I didn't want to risk it. I just styled it a bit more, added the braids, added the white hairs, distressed it a little bit, teased it out, and I was much happier with the new Thorin wig after that. And that's completed Thorin costume up to this point. Also did another photo shoot with my brother, and my other brother was watching us from inside the house. It was a snow shoot, which I'd always wanted to do in my Thorin costume, so it was a fun time, and I really love how the photos came out. I like to dress up as characters that transform me. I like doing easy cosplays. I like cosplaying as ladies. I do love costumes that completely change the way I look, and Thorin is one of them. So, want to see more? Subscribe, like the video, and follow me on Instagram and TikTok. I'm most active on those, especially Instagram. And yeah, see you next time.